All right, so my name is François Pivant. So I was a consultant at Palo IT for more than 2 years. I worked at Libon, a multi-platform VoIP and messaging app developed at Orange. And I recently joined Snips, a data science company that uses artificial intelligence to make technology disappear. So if you want to know more about Snips, you can go at snips.net. I invite you guys to take a look. So today I want to talk about product collective ownership applied to product design and product development. So why are you talking about this subject? Why are you talking about this topic? Why does it matter? So as we see, when you join a company, when you join a team, or when you have a team in an organization, well, you want to join people that actually have certain skills and a mindset and knowledge that are actually capable of achieving certain results. But in addition to those skills and mindset and knowledge, you actually expect some human qualities such as commitment, collaboration, and self-discipline. Some qualities that actually you need to successfully ship a great product. But the thing is, if you want those human qualities, commitment, collaboration, and self-discipline, you need people to be motivated. It can only be achieved if you have motivated people. So of course, in the first place, you need to hire those people originally motivated, but you need to keep them motivated. And one way to actually keep them motivated is the notion of collective ownership. People need to own what they do. They have to feel that they have an impact on the product, that they actually participate to the design, to the brainstorming, to the ideas, and they don't actually turn into somebody that actually execute order and that just follow what the hierarchy wants. So that's the reason why I want to talk about product collective ownership, which is a burning topic in most of the organizations. So today, the related topics are basically, at first I'm going to go back to the notion of collective ownership and how does it apply to product. So what is basically product collective ownership. Then I'm going to discuss about what are the requirements, what are the foundations to actually successfully embrace a collective ownership mindset, a collective ownership practices. And to finish, I'm going to talk about some concrete examples that are actually aligned with the notion of product collective ownership. So first, what is it? What is collective ownership? So collective ownership is nothing new. It is basically the ownership of something by all members of a group for the mutual benefit of all. And when it comes to software development, during the 90s, as the agile methodologies emerged, and especially Scrum or XP, it is basically, when it comes to code, it is basically that we encourage people to contribute new ideas across all the stages of the product and the project. And basically that any developer is invited, can change any line of code on every part of the product, on every part of the project, to add functionalities, fix bugs, do refactoring, and so on. And the idea behind that is that nobody becomes a bottleneck for change. So if you need to get something done on the server side, and the server developer, for example, is sick, but somebody else in the team can do it, then nothing should prevent us to actually make the fix. And when it comes to product collective ownership, it is pretty similar. It is pretty close to the idea of code collective ownership. The entire team owns the product, so owns in the sense that they have an impact on it. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have a financial participation in the product, but at least they own it in a sense that they are responsible for improving every part of the product. And in the end, the reason why they are all here together is because they want to deliver business value sooner to the end user, to the end customer. That's the whole point when you have a team and you think about product collective ownership. So there are certain points to keep in mind if you want to embrace product collective ownership. So the first point is that you have to be comfortable with the idea that any artifact belongs to the whole team, and that every member should be comfortable talking to each other about discipline that are not necessarily their primary discipline. The second point is no single member knows enough about the product or knows enough about the project to take all the decisions. It's just not possible. So you have to rely on everybody to take significant decisions. You have to consult the rest of the team to take significant decisions. And once again, the reason why the team is all together is because there is a final objective, there is a common vision, there is a common objective, which is the product. And everybody should care about the product quality and about the added value on the market. And the last point, which is related to product collective ownership, is notions such as value stream mapping or product vision. So value stream mapping is basically all the steps you have to go through from the idea to delivering the idea on prod. And not only Scrum Masters or product owners, product managers should care about that. The whole team should care about this. And product vision as well. Everybody should embrace the product vision and should participate to it and should be aligned with it. So that's what is basically product collective ownership. And despite the fact that this makes sense to the majority, if you talk to people about product collective ownership, or if you describe what we just talked about, it makes sense. Nobody is going to say that it's negative or we don't want that in our organization. Still, in most organizations, and most probably the large traditional organization, it is really hard to implement such an approach. And despite the fact that there is goodwill and people want to change. So over the past years, I tried to understand myself what are the reasons why, well, in most large traditional organizations, we struggle to actually embrace this idea of a product collective ownership, despite the fact that we want to be agile or lean. And basically, well, there are many different factors that can explain this, but they have three topics that I have in mind, and I want to share today. So the first one is the notion of cross-discipline teams. So basically, what is a cross-discipline team? I will put it simply, a cross-discipline team is a startup. When you want to build a startup, when you want to join a startup, you are going to gather all the people, all the skills that you need to actually deliver a successful product. So you're going to gather the people, the client developers, server developers, data, UX, UI designers, product managers, and so on. All the people you need to turn an idea into something real, into reality. And basically, when you think about product team, a product team is a startup. That's pretty much the same. So, and as you grow, the idea is you grow fractal. So you want to replicate this idea of a startup and basically have multiple small cross-discipline teams inside your organization that are independent and that can work on different parts of the product. And if it's not already the case, if you haven't read it, I invite you to read a very good book, which is Scaling Lean and Agile Development, written by Craig Larman and Bas Vodde. And they dedicate one part of their book to what they call feature teams, which are basically cross-discipline teams. And that's how they define a feature team. So basically, it's a long-lived team, a team that stays together for higher performances. It is a cross-functional and cross-component team, meaning that they can take any kind of feature and they have all the components they need to deliver their feature on the market. They are ideally, even if I'm tempted to actually remove ideally, they are ideally co-located so that they can communicate really fast and solve problems in a very efficient way. And they work on a complete customer-centric feature. So basically, they pull an issue that we face on the market that a user has, and they try to solve it through all the stages, from design to development and analysis and so on. And they are also composed of generalizing specialists, which doesn't mean that everybody knows about everything about the product, but people come from a primary discipline and they are curious about other disciplines to get things done. And typically in Scrum, it's no more than 7-9 people. So that's what we try to achieve when we grow. But ironically, when organizations grow, they rather tend to grow into component teams rather than feature teams. So basically all the servers together, and then all the UX, UI together, and this other client together, and so on. People isolated in their department. And that's the whole point. This is the first bottleneck. This is the first drawback. If you want to embrace the idea of product collective ownership, you need a cross-discipline team. You need a team with all the skills to actually achieve a goal. Because if you are in an organization which is structured in multiple component teams, and you have to work on feature A, for example, then you will have to synchronize with every department one by one, and you, as a product owner or as a product manager, you actually turn into a project coordinator or project manager rather than a product manager. So that's the first point. So basically, if we picture it, the whole team work together, and we gather all the components we need to iterate and deliver a potentially shippable product increment with the whole team. So that's the first point if you want to embrace the idea of product collective ownership. It is the first requirement. The second requirement is related to the notion of pooling systems. So what is pooling systems? Pooling system is coming from the Toyota production system, the Toyota way. So basically lean production. Lean production is Toyota. And most of the basis of agile methodologies and lean production is coming from Toyota. And the idea is instead of being in a push dynamic where many organizations actually are in a technology push, they're trying to push based on what they know, and then they're trying to actually find a certain need with those technology. It is the opposite. You actually identify some needs on the market, and you gradually roll back on your process to develop according to what you actually need, what the user needs on the market. And that's the second bottleneck. Most of the organization are actually in a pushing system rather than in a pooling system. And it is closely related to the first point of cross-discipline team, because when you are structured in component team, you are naturally going to be in a technology push rather than a market pull. Because we have those guys on the server side and the client side and those designers. Everybody cares about their own stuff, and they think that they know what is good for the product. And in the end, we have something which is not aligned with the vision that was defined from management or from product management. So that's the second point. The third point is related to culture and culture of ideas. So typically, how would you define, what would be your position in an organization related to ideas? Because if you go back to Toyota, once again, Toyota is kind of the origin for many organization topic. So at Toyota, they identify what they call waste. So a waste is basically anything that you produce in your process which doesn't add value to your end user. And they identified 3 types of waste, so Muda, Muri, Mura. So we're going to talk about the first one in the next slide. And Muri is overburden of people or machine, and Mura is inconsistency in your process. And when it comes to software development, well, there is Mary and Tom Popenik that actually wrote Lean Software Development, that they actually tried to translate the Toyota way, the Toyota production system in software development. And they went back to this idea of Muda, waste. So typically one waste will be extra features. I think it happened to all of us to develop features that we wonder, why are we actually doing this? Is it going to take weeks or months? And it's not adding value to the end user. So it's a typical waste in the Toyota sense. Or task switching, you actually, because you're not part of a team, of a fixed team, and you're not dedicated to a topic, you're going to switch, you're going to do some context switching, and it's going to reduce the efficiency of your work. And I'm not going to list all the waste because I guess that if you guys are here, you must be comfortable with this idea of lean production and Muda, Mori, Mura. If it's not the case, then I invite you guys to actually read Toyota Way, which is a very good book to introduce lean production. And later on, we started to talk about an eighth waste, eighth Muda, which is unused employee creativity. So what is it basically? Is the idea that you hire people, but you hire them only exclusively for their primary skills, and you don't take advantage of their ideas. And this is the third point. In addition with cross-discipline teams, pooling systems, the third point is you should have an organization, a culture, in the sense that you let ideas emerge. So when I think about that, when I think about this idea of that you want ideas to win, and whatever you position in the organization, I think about those two companies. So Epic Games and Spotify. So Epic Games, you may know, they developed games such as Unreal Tournament or Gears of War. Very successful game, and it's a well-known company, especially in the US. And if you go to their website, you might read something like this. We hire extremely talented and experienced people and give them all the resources they need to succeed in a structured but casual and open environment. And, most importantly, we invite everyone's input into the design process to make sure the best ideas win. And that's the whole spirit. Even if they don't mention it, they are pretty much aligned with the idea of product collective ownership. Because whatever you position, whatever your role in the company, even if you're an intern that just joined the company, if you have a great, astonishing ideas and everybody's convinced, they're going to make sure that this idea win. And that's the culture you want to see in organization. It doesn't matter where your position, it doesn't matter your role. What matters is good ideas, and you want them to win. And it's pretty related, it's pretty close to the Spotify system, which is a growing popularity, especially thanks to Henrik Nickberg, that actually did some great videos and articles and books. And the idea at Spotify, they have cross-discipline teams. They have multiple cross-discipline teams. That's the way they grew. And that's the reason why they could sustain their growth. And basically, their team is fully in charge of finding solutions and implementing solutions. So what they're going to do is basically the people in charge, typically the product owners, are going to go to those teams and say, we identify those issues. We know that our users face this, or we have a business need. And we're going to let you guys actually find the solution, be creative, brainstorm, define what you want, and specify and so on, until actually solving the issue. And there's a good metaphor for this. It's basically, we want to cross the river, and you guys find the solution. We might build a bridge, or we might actually swim, or we might actually jump, or build an helicopter, or whatever you want. You find the solution, you are in charge. And that's the idea of product collective ownership. There shouldn't be people that think and other people that actually implement. It should be all together. So that's pretty much it. There are other factors for sure, and you can find many different reasons why it is hard to actually embrace a product collective ownership mindset and practices. But if you start with the three top ones, then you should make it. Cross-discipline teams, a pooling system, a pooling dynamic, and let ideas emerge because you have a culture that allow it. So if we want to put that into perspective, if we want to put that into practice, what could we do that we think is aligned with the idea of product collective ownership? So first is the very beginning, brainstorming. So traditionally, when we brainstorm, we think about marketing teams, or we think about top management, or product owners, product managers, all those people that have to think to actually find the right ideas. And despite the fact that we need those brainstorming, there can be brainstorming between typically product owners or between marketing. That's not the point. The point is that those people, because they have similar profile, because they have similar experiences, they have similar background, it is most likely that they are going to have the same ideas. And when you brainstorm, what you want is actually diversity. You want more diversity to have greater ideas. And that's one of the reasons why you have to bring your whole team, typically server developers and client developers and UX, UI designers and QA engineer, all the people that are part of your cross-discipline team and are going to actively participate to the brainstorming session. And that's one point, but so the idea that you have more diversity and you have greater ideas, but it's also that because people participate from the very beginning of the product, they feel that they own the product and they feel that they actually actively participate, they have an impact on it, and it boosts motivation. That's the idea. And so basically, if we put that into practice, a concrete example will be innovation games. When you do innovation games, you should do innovation games with your team. The team shouldn't be busy coding. The team should be busy with you, actually brainstorming around ideas. So let's imagine that you want to do one of the innovation game. So there's one I like very much, which is Prune the Product Tree. So basically the idea is you draw a tree from the trunk to the branches and the fruits and the blue sky, and you invite your team to jump in the session and ask them to write down ideas, features on Post-its, and put them on the relevant part of the tree. So basically, bottom of the tree will be basic features, and top of the tree, blue sky, will be the ideal feature we'd like to see on the product. So if we go into deeper details, the trunk is the basic feature that don't really add value, but that are necessary for your product. The branches are your core features. The fruits are the killer features. So typically, we could argue that the like button on Facebook is a killer feature, is a fruit, because it's quite easy to develop, but we need the whole basis to actually make that happen, and we need the whole team, the cross-discipline team, to let it emerge. And blue sky is really the ideal goal what you wanna achieve in the long term. And if you do this exercise with your team, with the whole team, you're going to be surprised by the output, by the results. Because once again, there is a lot of diversity and different background. You're going to have tons of ideas. And there is this quote from Linus Pauling, which is very interesting. The best way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas. And once again, that's the whole point. So from the very beginning, you shouldn't wait to actually start development to include the team. The team should be including in the very beginning, in the early stage of the product. So that's one concrete example, typically trying to brainstorm with your cross-discipline team through innovation games or whatever fits the needs of your team and your organization. So Prune the Product Tree is one, but you can find others in the innovation game site. The second concrete example is related to customer feedback. So when it comes to customer feedback, it is generally communication managers and community managers that are in charge of being in touch with the users and let the rest of the organization know what they think. So we need, for sure, communication managers and community managers. That's not the point. Of course, when your product grow, well, you're going to have thousands and millions of users and sometimes hundreds of millions of users. So there's no way that you cross-discipline handle a relationship with those guys. So you need a community manager for sure, but there is an important point, which is the team has to stay close to the user. They have to show compassion and empathy regarding the user's needs, wants, like, dislike, and pain points. And why do you want to do this is if the user is something far, far away for your team, then as you don't have really compassion, if they have a pain point, it won't be that, well, it won't prevent you from sleeping, basically. So what you want is those guys, you as a product owner or product manager in the team, to stay close to the users. And a concrete example could be typically that you dedicate half a day, let's say a month, with your team, and you review all the social networks and the stores and the feedback and everything, and everybody does that exclusively. And it creates some kind of relationship and compassion from your team to your users. And it's actually very helpful when you actually want to try to fix defects and improve a part of your product. So that's one way to do it, but just be creative. If you just find ways and concrete actions to get your users and team closer together, that's the idea. The third concrete example is related to specification and design. It's one of my favorite parts. So traditionally, when we think about specifications, it's usually product owners and product managers writing specifications. So whether it is user stories or whatever you use, whatever the technique you use. And then designers do the UX and UI design and so on. So basically back to waterfall methodology. Even if we pretend to be agile, or even if we pretend to do Scrum or XP, many times we think we are agile while we actually literally do waterfall models. So here the idea is to go back to the definition of engineer. When you want to engineer something, it is literally design and implement a solution, design and build a solution. So people have to participate to specification and design from the beginning as they actually participated to the brainstorm. So one way to do it, one concrete example that I actually used in my previous mission is what I would call the stand-up grooming. So regularly, you do a regular backlog grooming, but in a stand-up fashion. You gather all your team around a whiteboard, and as a product owner or product manager, you write the business needs in the form of a user story. So typically, let's imagine that you want to improve the first use of your app, the registration process. So typically, in order to ease the registration process, as a new user, I want my information pre-filled in the form with a last name, first name, and email address. That could be one story. And the idea is, as you write this need, this business need, to reduce the user drop during the first use of your app, you're going to invite the whole team to participate in the writing, in the specification writing. So let's imagine that you have this kind of template. So it's a template I'm comfortable with. Doesn't mean that it's the only one, but it's one way to do it. So basically, you have your goal. In order to benefit as a persona, I want a feature. You have a list of acceptance criteria that could be business rules, mechanics, quality standards, all the stuff you want to list that are related to your feature. You, of course, have some UX, UI with wireframes, acceptance tests to validate your feature, and some KPIs, the stuff you want to track to validate or invalidate an hypothesis, an idea that you have in mind to actually make sure that what you pushed on prod actually works. So all of this shouldn't be written exclusively by the product owner or the product manager. It should be written by the whole team. So one way to do it, going back to the idea of stand-up grooming, is this first part, the goal and acceptance criteria, should be written at least with the whole team. And if you do this, you're going to bring your own criteria. So let's say you have 3 bullet points that summarize what you have in mind. But if you actively participate as a team, there will be much more ideas that are going to come up. So if you talk with the QA engineer, they're going to think about some corner cases and edge cases. And then if you discuss with the server team, they're going to talk about some error cases that we have to keep in mind. And the client developer are going to discuss about limitation on the UI and so on. And UX designers are going to participate as well. And in the end, if you do this, you're going to have much more criteria than you would have if you were alone. And that's the whole point. It's not just to boost motivation because people are going to participate at the early stage. It's also to have a much greater story defined into details. And another benefit is basically as you groom all together, the very day you start your planning, so typically if you do a sprint planning, you're not going to have to explain what the story is about because you wrote it together. It has been defined together. So there's no point in actually trying to make people understand what it is about and avoid type of reaction like, I don't understand it, or why are we doing this, or it doesn't make sense, doesn't match with the vision, or those kind of stuff. So if you include them from the beginning, you will avoid all those pain points and you will deliver much greater value, much greater details. So once again, that's one way to do it, but I will actually invite you guys to give it a try, trying to do with a whiteboard and the cross-discipline team to define your stories. And last but not least, this is the idea. I think you are well aware of this. The idea, basically, in agile methodologies or in lean production or lean thinking, everybody is a QA engineer. So once again, it doesn't mean that you don't have QAs anymore, because as your product grows, you need QA engineers. You need people that actually know the system, know how to test it, and go into details and look for the tiny corner cases and edge cases. That's not the point. The point is that despite the fact we have those QA engineers, the rest of the team, everybody is a QA engineer. And everybody should care about the quality of the product. And there are two notions basically about that. There is responsibility. So the team, we think that the team is responsible for the product. But you can only have responsibility if it comes with authority. The team needs some authority over the product to actually have some responsibility. You cannot hold a team responsible for something if they have no authority, if they have no power on the decision making. It's part of the deal. And one concrete example for the QA engineer part is basically, let's imagine that you're about to merge some code in the main branch, in the development branch, in the trunk. And if you work on an app, you make a build, and for the next 15 minutes, everybody stops and they stop what they are currently doing. So wireframes or specifications or development code developing code on the client side or on the server side, whatever they are doing, they stop. And they gather as a team and test the product to see how it fits. What is the quality, the overall quality of the product? Do we see defects? Does it match with the user's needs? Is it actually what we expected? Is it what we're trying to achieve? How do we feel when using the product? Are we convinced of the product? Because if the team is not convinced of the product, there is no way that the end user, there's no way that the customer is actually convinced. So you have to be convinced yourself as a team. And everybody must say, yes, we should put that on prod, it's going to rock. And if server, client, UX, product manager, everybody says that, then the probability that it's actually working is much higher. So that's the point. Trying to regularly sit together and freeze what you're currently doing, not for half a day, but let's say 15 minutes or 30 minutes or more, and test together. And possibly where you can push the idea even further is inviting real users to jump in and testing the product with you and give you instant reaction. They give you live feedback on what they think about the product. Maybe as a team, because you work too long on the product, you feel it's great, but from the user perspective, there are some missing stuff and there are some pain points that you haven't seen, you haven't checked. So it's in addition to freezing some time to test for 15 minutes or 20 minutes or more, you can invite some people to jump in. And organizations literally do this. They identify their core users and they invite them for a session in return for a fee or something, or whatever the compensation. And they can give instant feedback and work as a pair with developers. They work as a pair with a team for half a day, let's say. And once again, it's going to fix defects and increase the quality, but it's also going to create some compassion between the team and the user. It's the kind of behavior you want to see in your team. And that's pretty much it about product collective ownership. So, any question? Yep.
How do you deal with conflicts? I mean, I'm pretty sure there will be conflicts between ideas during brainstorming. So, if everyone is a product owner, who will make the final decision?
So, not everyone is a product owner, because you still have the roles, but you shouldn't prevent ideas from emerging. That's the point.
Yes, if I'm feeling that I'm never listening to me, so I will not feel as a product owner. If I have an idea, and finally someone else think different, and I have another idea that conflicts with mine, if I'm feeling that the decision will not follow my direction, I will feel like I'm not a product owner, and maybe the next time I will not want to merge ideas.
So just to rephrase the question, so basically, how do we handle conflicts in ideas inside a team? So conflict, well, from my perspective, from my point of view, conflict is a good thing, it's something positive. You should see that as an opportunity to actually have some diversity once again in your team. So if you take an example, well, it's fine if you have conflicts, and there's only one way to know if it works or not, is to put it on prod and test. That's the reason why you want KPIs. That's the reason why you want to validate invalid hypotheses. The point is, it doesn't matter to be right or wrong. What matters is to give it a try, have hypotheses, and try to validate and invalidate those hypotheses. So indeed, everybody is invited to let ideas emerge, but as it is the role of a product manager or product owners to be in charge of the product and the return on investment and the quality of the product, at some point somebody can decide. But the decision making is done considering every ideas that have emerged in the team. And sometimes you have to make trade-off. You have to accept that, okay, it's not coming from it's not your own ideas, but you don't really care because what you want is best idea to win. So from my perspective, if you want to be a good product owner or good product manager, you shouldn't be the one that actually has all the ideas. You should be a great listener, gather the feedback from the team, the user, the shareholder, the stakeholders, and identify what matches with the vision and make it win. It's absolutely fine if you have no ideas, but you are capable of actually identifying the great ideas and develop them. So that would be that's actually my way of doing. I'd rather try to let other people's ideas emerge instead of my own. But that's one way to do it. I'm not 100% convinced that it's the right way to do it.
On one of your slides, you mentioned that a team should be long-lived.
Yep.
For a team to be long-lived, it's an issue that is above product. It's more an organizational issue to me, to motivate people enough that they want to stay, not only in the team, but in the organization.
So of course, yeah, it comes to, so the question is, how do you handle what is long-lived? What do we intend by long-lived teams?
More generally, I think the boundary is quite blurry between product collective ownership and organization collective ownership. And how?
But you can only.
I'm not sure a team can just own their product if the organization itself is not.
Absolutely.
Has not the same philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is basically if you embrace a product collective ownership mindset in your team, but it's not the case in the rest of the organization, how do you handle that? Indeed, that's one point. That's the reason why if you're a coach, typically, one of the first work to do is at the organization level. Of course, if your organization is unconvinced that a collective ownership brings greater results and will give you some positive results, it is pretty hard to apply it in your own team. You can try, but you won't get all the benefits as if you were more in a Spotify model. Or
some experience on.
Yes. So my own experience is basically, as you grow, if you don't grow fractal in a startup way, in a feature team way, and you are in component teams typically, so all people isolated, it will basically require 10 times the energy to go back to feature teams. And at some organization, to be frank, it's almost impossible. If you are in a very large organization and it's deeply in the culture to be organized in component teams, unless you deploy a huge energy, it is almost impossible to change it. So that's my point of view. It's where I had the opportunity to discuss with Craig Larman. He said that some organization, during the talk, you can't change all the organization, and that's why you have to grow in a clever way from the beginning, in a fractal way.
About the ideas, how do you how do you decide or define which ideas are the best one? Is it a collective decision or just the product manager decision?
So it's more, the idea is more a, if you believe that you, so the question is how do you handle the best ideas, how do you choose the best ideas? Is it the team or the product manager that actually choose? So if you truly believe that the team you work with is super good and you work with talented people and you trust them, you are more likely to actually make the collective idea win rather than your own idea. And well, once again, you have to believe that the people you work with are competent and you trust them. And anyways, unless you're on prod, there's no way to know for sure if it's the best idea. You just can try to identify some of the best idea that you heard about your team. So it's, from my point of view, it's more a collective decision rather than a product manager or product owner decision. That's the whole point of collective ownership. Question? Yeah.
I think the product ownership with the context of a single team can be easy, but how do you handle when you are at a large scale product with tens of teams to make each member of the teams to feel concerned by the product of ideas or practices?
Okay, so the question is basically how do you make people feel concerned about a product when the organization actually grows, and how do you sustain the growth, basically? So indeed, that's a huge challenge for any organization. When you launch a startup, it is easy because you are limited and everybody can participate, whatever your position, indeed. And as you grow, there's some things that you cannot avoid, as splitting the teams and so on. So the thing is, to keep this startup spirit, this startup mindset, you have to grow Fractal. There's a good book to read, which is actually a Fractal organization, that explains how you were supposed to grow in a modular way rather than a monolithic way. And so when you do small, manageable, cross-discipline teams that are in charge of a given mission, well, you keep the same spirit and they still feel involved in decision-making. It's just that they are in charge of a smaller part of the product, but still they are in charge. And when you have a cross-discipline team, what you expect is basically to give them a long-term mission, as you will give a long-term mission to a product team. So, and then of course you have to know how you slice properly your features in your product. But that's the spirit. Always stay a startup. That's the whole the reason why it's lean startup or running lean dynamics are also successful, is because they explain how to remain in startup spirit, whatever the size of the organization. Questions? Other questions?
Do
Yes?
you have experience of trying to get this product collective ownership when part, if not most of the team, is from agencies and everything is outsourced?
Okay, so question is, do have experience in implementing a product collective mindset with people coming from people that are basically contractors from different places? So yes, that was the case when I was at Orange. And indeed, because you're not from the same organization, it is some additional complexity, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. What matters is more how people think, what are their own mindset. And even if they are contractors, but if they embrace this idea, then it's something you can do. Once again, it's all about mindset. The very basis, if you go back to Lean is not really about practices, it's more about the way you think and what are the principles and values that you have in mind. So what matters, I would say, for this, is to make sure that the people you collaborate with embrace the same value as you do.
And did you have specific issues due to this contract?
So specific issues related to contractors.
Yeah.
So
I'm again thinking about this long-lived issue. Because you cannot
Indeed.
control how long.
Yes, so for the long-lived idea of a team, indeed, there are some things that you cannot control. You cannot control that people are going to stay forever. But in some companies, because they actually succeed to create a great culture and motivate people all the time, typically a Spotify model, people stay much longer in the company. They are much more loyal to the company because they share those values, and they actually, well, they realize that it's quite rare to find those kind of organization on the market. So if you embrace this kind of mindset and principles, then it will be much easier as an organization to keep the right skill set in your teams. You can do it, but it's a lot of work on the culture. Thank you.